Good morning, everyone.
Had a good couple of days since we last saw one another. I have a million pieces of paper in front of me, so we are calling to order meeting 127 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Today we commence clause-by-clause study of Bill C-377, an Act to amend the Parliament of Canada Act Need to Know. Colleagues, particularly to our witnesses, a friendly reminder, if not in use, please make sure that your headsets are put on the stickers in front of you in order to avoid doing damage to the health and well-being of our interpreters that are working so hard on our behalf. We have a number of officials that are with us today who are here to provide guidance when necessary. So I would like to welcome Tracy, Chief Strategic Policy from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Justin Chan, Director, Counter-Terrorism Policy. From the Privy Council Office, Sean Jorgensen, Director General and Chief Security Officer. From the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Chief Superintendent Jeffrey Bolak, Acting Chief Security Officer, Departmental Security. And from the Treasury Board Secretariat, Adam Hatfield, Executive Director, Policy on Government Security. Thank you very much to our officials for being here. So, colleagues, there were obviously a number of changes and moving pieces over the course of the past couple of days, but I believe we have landed in a place that should allow for, I hope, a fruitful discussion as well as an efficient discussion today. So I ask for everybody's patience. We should not be frustrated with colleagues should they have questions or a need for clarity given how much has changed over the course of the past few days. So with that, we are going to begin. So the first amendment that had been put forward was G1.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
We declined to move G1 and G2.
Okay. Colleagues, G1 and G2 are being declined to move. Seeing nobody else wishing to speak to this, we're going to move to our next amendment, which is CPC 1. Mr. Ruff, I believe you would like to move the amendment and speak to it. So the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So CPC 1, as everybody I'm sure has a copy. I don't need to read the whole thing in, but the whole purpose that I am moving this is just to take out this whole reference to need to know, which was a concern that was shared with the committee by the officials, because again, as much as that terminology is sort of used within the community as the first turnkey, it's a recognition it did provide some confusion and ambiguity. So by bringing it forward and just changing, because the whole intent of my bill, as I've stated very clearly.
Mr. Ruff, I'm sorry, we've got a little bit of a technical procedural issue we have to deal with very briefly. I'm going to suspend. I'll inform you of what that is, and we'll get back to it, okay? thank you for your patience there. Mr. Ruff, I'm going to ask you to begin again. We are now at CPC 1. Do we have a mover for CPC 1? Mr. Ruff, I believe you'd like to move it and speak to it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I will just read it in. So I move that Bill C-377 in Clause 1 be amended by replacing lines 15 and 16 on page 2 with the following. Quote, the consideration of the application deemed to need that security clearance, unquote. And so, as I was trying to explain earlier, this addresses the concerns that were raised by the officials last week about the term need to know. And it just clears up that ambiguity and clearly focuses on the fact that this is as I've mentioned in all my speeches and testimony, the only purpose of my bill is about allowing parliamentarians to apply for a secret security clearance that has nothing to do with how the government controls access to that information or ever disseminates it. And so the purpose of my bill to clarify is just to apply for that security clearance, and so that's why I put this change forward.
Okay. So, colleagues, just a reminder for this process, as I know it's been a while for some of us, now that it's been moved, if there are speakers, of course, members can speak to it. Once the list is exhausted, we'll move to a vote. Ms. Matheson, I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to hear from the witnesses here because there were considerable questions raised at a previous meeting in terms of all the moving parts on this bill. So I wanted to hear from the witnesses their opinions on this amendment, and if some of the questions that were raised in terms of questions on security and inadmissibility and so on are cleared up by this amendment.
Hi, thank you for that. Good morning, MPs. So I guess I would just open by saying one thing that that this particular amendment, I think, does clarify the fact that the intent of the bill is really about the need to get the security clearance. So for us, no other comment than that. It does clarify. Thank you. I don't know if any other colleagues will have anything to say.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. The language of deemed to need to know, we would not know how to interpret that in our security policy. This amendment removes that language and is much clearer, so no further concerns.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I ask you to call a vote on the amendment CPC 1.
Ms. Romanado.
Support.
Mr. Turnbull.
I support.
Mr. Weiler.
Favor.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Duguid.
In favor.
Mr. Ruff.
In favor.
Mr. Calkins.
In favor.
Mr. Cooper.
In favor.
Mr. Duncan.
In favor.
Madame Gaudreau.
Oui.
Ms. Matheson.
Oui.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, colleagues, so CPC 1 has been adopted as an amendment. We will now move to CPC 2. Mr. Ruff, I believe you would like to move the motion and speak to it, the amendment rather. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, CPC 2 here, that Bill C-377 in Clause 1 be amended by adding after line 16 on page 2 the following, quote, 1.1, an application referring to in subsection 1 is to be processed and managed as though it were made by a person appointed by a minister under subsection 128(1) of the Public Service Employment Act, unquote. So the logic that I did this, I actually looked at some of the language that I think maybe the government has considered, but as was rightly pointed out, if we just refer to the standard on security screening that is laid out in Treasury Board guidelines, that's a regulatory document, a policy that is subject to change because it's not linked to legislation, and then we could have a challenge here with the Parliament of Canada Act being out of sync with policies that exist across the government. So that's a legitimate concern. So as rightly pointed out, we have the Public Service Employment Act that does address that and does link it. So any changes that would then occur that impact the PSEA takes place. The reason I specifically picked section 128(1) is that's the part that refers to anybody employed in a minister's office. We, as parliamentarians, are not public servants. We're elected or appointed parliamentarians, part of the legislative branch. So it made perfect sense to link us to those same types of positions that would be employed, whether they're exempt staff in a minister's office, to follow under the exact same conditions, because it made a lot more sense to link us that way. So that was the reason why I did that. It makes it clear what it links to. It's linked to legislation, not just a policy. And at the same time, it links us to those equivalent, or as close as equivalent positions that exist outside the actual public service. I don't know. I'll leave my comments at that for now, Chair.
Okay. Seeing no further commentary, Madam Clerk, I'll ask you to call a vote on CPC 2.
Ms. Romanado.
Oppose.
Mr. Turnbull.
Opposed.
Mr. Weiler.
Contre.
Ms. Damoff.
No.
Mr. Duguid.
Nay.
Mr. Ruff.
In favor.
Mr. Calkins.
In favor.
Mr. Cooper.
Oh, yeah, in favor.
Mr. Duncan.
In favor?
Madame Gaudreau.
No.
Ms. Matheson.
No.
Five yeas, 7 nays.
Okay, colleagues, CPC,
Four. Sorry.
CPC 2 has been defeated. Mr. Duguid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the following amendment from the floor. My staff have emailed it to the clerk in both official languages, that Bill C-377 in Clause 1 be amended by adding after line 20 on page 2 the following. Prohibition. 3. A member or former member of the Senate or the House of Commons must not knowingly disclose information to which they were given access under a security clearance, except if the disclosure is made during an in-camera meeting of a committee of the Senate or the House of Commons or of a joint committee, and every individual in attendance has also been granted the necessary security clearance by the Government of Canada. The rationale for this, Mr. Speaker, is, and while we wait for the email to be distributed, offer our reasoning on this side. This amendment provides a necessary safeguard measure to prevent inappropriate disclosure or classified information to individuals who have not been granted a security clearance by the Government of Canada.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duguid. Mr. Ruff, just before I turn the floor to you, just for clarity, colleagues, because there were so many changes in terms of numbers and I'm going to read the reference number just to make sure that everybody is following. Okay, so the reference number for the amendment that Mr. Duguid just moved from the floor is as follows: 133-23960. I'm seeing nods so that we're in agreement. Okay. Mr. Ruff, followed by Ms. Matheson.
So, Chair, I do have concerns here, and first I actually want to, as a point of order, address the admissibility of this amendment, because this amendment actually talks about the control or access to classified information. That was never part of the intent of my bill. My bill is only dealing with the applications of security clearance. This talks about how the government controls or disseminates information, how it can be shared or not shared. That has nothing to do with the intent of my bill. My bill is only to set into law the privilege of parliamentarians to apply for a security clearance. So this is, to me, well beyond the scope. And to get to a point that I want to address, and I do want to ask the witnesses this, and I think a few of them can weigh in, because, as you know, sort of how information is controlled is subject to really the individual departments at the sort of DM level down. However, obviously, PCO would be the lead is my intent, it would be my guess on how information would be shared if it is ever shared with parliamentarians. And so I guess my first question to the witnesses is, just because somebody's applied to for a security clearance and even have passed that security process, are they granted access to classified information just because they have a clearance?
Yeah.
No. Is that the same there? It's this, everybody agrees with that across the witness board? Excellent. Secondly, the process that was used for previous type scenarios, as we've laid out, during my testimony and during the debate here, on previous committees that were formed, ad hoc committees, when information was shared. Actually, cancel that. My point is, with the amendment to my bill and the way the bill currently stands, with no further amendments, if it was to pass as it is right now in the legislation with the approved amendment, would that in some way interfere or inhibit the government of actually putting a step what this amendment proposes in place? Is this basically somewhat the status quo for the way the government, or the government can put into sort of execution this exact sort of process? My point is, if my bill passes, does that in any way stop the government from doing this when it actually comes to the passage of, or the sharing of classified information?
I think I can address some of that, sir. Currently, within the Government of Canada, the highest level overarching policy that governs how security is managed is the Policy on Government Security set by the Treasury Board. And that policy defines a number of aspects. Security screening is one of them, but it is built assuming that all of those aspects are there. Currently, the Policy on Government Security does not apply to parliamentarians. It applies to public servants. So the question of how a department would engage with an individual who's not subject to the Policy on Government Security, even though they have a security clearance, is an unasked question. That would be new for us, and we would have to figure out how to deal with that at the time.
So my question there, and maybe it's more to Mr. Jorgensen, who's been experienced, we've had past experience where classified information has been shared with parliamentarians once they have got a security clearance. The Winnipeg Lab issue is one example, and there's others. So we do have a process in place that we've come up with, or when I say we, the government has put in place. My question, though, is my bill, if it was to pass, because again, we have lots of parliamentarians that have security clearances. I had one for my first, long before I got put on the NSICOP committee. I had a top secret security clearance that was still current, held by PSPC, and the government did not give me access to any information. So my point is, the fact that a parliamentarian has a security clearance does not in any way inhibit the government from putting safeguards in place before they would share classified information. Just having a security clearance is my point, a parliamentarian, that does not grant them access to squat, right? It's just a step that they need to go through before they could get to steps 2 or 3.
If I may just answer your question, Mr. Ruff, thank you for that. I think the issue here is the safeguards that is being brought forward are meant very much to do what you saw, for example, in the NSICOP Act. Knowing that NSICOP was going to get access to the information it does, they put the safeguards in beforehand. And I think that, if I may, that it seems to be in the same spirit that you're seeing these amendments being proposed, is that they would like the government, people in this committee would like to see those kind of safeguards to ensure that when that moment comes, we've got those safeguards in place and there's no ambiguity as to how we would address that with you.
So I think that's actually a good idea, and I encourage the government to bring forth that sort of clarity. But the purpose, and this is why I'm making the case that this is beyond the scope of my bill. My bill has nothing to do with that. My bill allows parliamentarians to apply for a security clearance. That's it. It doesn't talk about the sharing of information. It doesn't talk about granting access to anything. So my question again goes back to, if the bill was to be passed as it's currently written and currently approved, including the amendment, would that somehow stop the government from putting those safeguards or processes in place?
No, it would not, but it would require those safeguards to be put in place for the clearance to have any effect.
I'll leave my comments at that on this issue of admissibility. Chair, I think there's other people that may want to speak to
So,
it.
Mr. Ruff, I need clarity from you here.
Yep.
Are you challenging the admissibility?
Yes.
Okay, then this is a non-debatable point, which needs to go right to a vote.
When I asked for that,
Un rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Just don't,
Point of order, Chair.
but that's when I asked if we challenged the admissibility that we were able to explain the rationale.
no, you have.
All
What
right.
I'm saying is that you've challenged.
Oh,
you've
I can
challenged.
make
so,
my
so I'm first clarifying that you're challenging admissibility. I have. Okay. So I'm going to rule on this now, in a moment. But following my ruling, it is not a debatable point. Following my ruling, it goes right to a vote. That's what I'm explaining to the committee.
Only if we challenge your ruling.
But he's just told me he's challenging my ruling. No. Or sorry. He's if he challenges my ruling, yes. Okay? That's what I'm explaining, that it's not a debatable point. Yeah. Okay. Madame Gaudreau, vous avez un appel.
Ms. Gaudreau, you have a point of order. Yes, it's just to say the following. We shouldn't be forgetting the interpreters who are doing amazing work today, and I understand a bit of English, but it's important that all discussions be properly interpreted. So I would ask all of us here today to speak calmly, especially when emotions arise. People tend to talk very quickly, and so I'd advise against that. Thank you very much, Ms. Gaudreau.
With the legislative clerk on the matter of Mr. Ruff's challenging of the admissibility. I disagree with Mr. Ruff. I'm accepting the advice that has been provided to me by the legislative clerks on this matter. We will now go to a vote. And what we are voting on, should there be a challenge? This is my assumption.
I'm going to challenge you, Chair.
The challenge of the chair has been brought forward by Mr. Ruff. We are now going to vote on whether to uphold my ruling that I've just given or not. So for clarity, Mr. Ruff does not believe that what Mr. Duguid has just moved should be admissible. I am saying that I disagree with Mr. Ruff. I believe that it is within the scope of the bill and is admissible. Mr. Ruff has challenged that ruling. We are now voting on my ruling, and then we will continue. Okay? Madam Clerk.
So the vote is that the chair's decision be sustained. Ms. Romanado,
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Weiler,
Sorry, Alex, I was just assuming that you were.
Mr. Weiler, Ms.
Yes.
Damoff,
Yes.
Mr. Duguid,
Sustain.
Mr. Ruff,
Against.
Mr. Calkins.
Against.
Mr. Cooper,
Against.
Mr. Duncan,
Against.
Madame Gaudreau,
Oui.
Ms. Matheson.
Yes.
Okay, so for clarity, colleagues, of what this vote means, my decision is carried. It is admissible. So on the speaking list, I had Madame Matheson, followed by Mr. Calkins, followed by Mr. Duncan. Ms. Matheson, followed by Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Chair. I think to better clarify this amendment, I'd like to sub-amend it. So, and I have provided the clerk, now I don't know if you want some time for the clerk to distribute it in both official languages.
On l'a reçu.
Just a moment, the clerk would like to explain to me the process that's unfolded here, so just give me one moment, please. Okay, so colleagues, the clerk has sent you an email with the sub-amendment. Has sent an email that contains the sub-amendment in both official languages that Ms. Matheson is about to speak to. So I'm looking, okay, if you'd like a printed copy, then I'm going to suspend and wait until there's a printed copy that gives members the opportunity to review it. And at which point I will go back to Ms. Matheson, who will continue moving the sub-amendment. Okay, just
Read it in and then have it suspend, or?
I'm just going to suspend now so that the request can be fulfilled. Okay, everybody will have it in a printed form. Ms. Matheson, the floor will resume as yours, and then we will move forward with whatever next steps we decide to take on that. So we're briefly suspended, okay? Thank you for your patience. Ms. Matheson, the floor was yours, and you were in the process of presenting a sub-amendment to the amendment that Mr. Duguid had put forward. We paused because members had asked for a physical copy in both official languages, which is now in front of all members. So I'm going to ask you to, from the beginning, please, present the sub-amendment that you were speaking to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to, and I'll read the amendment, or the amendment with the sub-amendment, so it's as changed. A member or former member of the Senate or the House of Commons must not knowingly disclose information to which they were given access under a security clearance through Section 13.1 of the Parliament of Canada Act, except if the disclosure is made during a special committee of the Senate or the House of Commons, or of a joint committee under an agreement with all House leaders of recognized parties and complies with established procedures and practices for the secure handling, storage, transportation, transmission, and destruction of information or documents, including any requirement found in Treasury Board policy, guideline, or directive. So I think this keeps the intent of the amendment and is in line with existing practice. I think that it's important to recognize that committees, even within camera, don't have the capacity or the infrastructure to deal with that security or the documents that we would be talking about and the clearances and so on. And I hope that this actually goes back to what Mr. Hatfield was talking about in terms of meeting Treasury Board requirements.
Matheson, I've got a list of 3 speakers that would like to speak to your sub-amendment. The current list is Mr. Calkins, followed by Mr. Duncan, followed by Mr. Cooper. Mr. Calkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding the fact that I think the committee has erred in the admissibility of the original amendment and now the sub-amendment, this becomes incredibly problematic. Because we're now getting into the overthinking portion of what the intended scope of Mr. Ruff's original legislation was, which is simply to grant members of Parliament the ability to apply for a security clearance. If I am reading this amendment and sub-amendment correctly, what it says is a member or former member of the Senate or House of Commons must not knowingly disclose information to which they were given access to. If we're looking at the original amendment, it says of a joint committee and every individual in attendance in an in-camera meeting. Who's allowed to come into an in-camera meeting? Each one of us is allowed to bring our legislative assistant, and the standing orders and the rules that we make for a committee also allow somebody from the whip's office. The way I interpret that is that means everybody in attendance, which means we'll either have to basically work against ourselves and by asking our staff to leave, because if they don't have the security clearance, the meeting would not be allowed to proceed, and the sharing of information would not be allowed to proceed. And same with the whip's office. Now, that seems reasonable, that everybody in attendance should have the security clearance. I'm not suggesting that. But the problem is not a single witness that we've heard from at this place has indicated or spoke to whether or not this was necessary. I have no indication from any of the testimony that I've seen that, for example, every one of the staff members that we hire has to sign a confidentiality agreement, that anything that they learn or come to or comes to their information while they're in our employment cannot release that information during our employment and after employment. And I am sure that when classified information is shared with those who need to know it, there is protocols and measures in place to make sure that that information stays secure under certain penalties. And I think that's the place to put those enforcements in, not in Mr. Ruff's legislation, which is simply trying to give members of Parliament a little bit of the privileges that we've been elected to do, which is to see information. So I don't like the amendment, and I certainly Don't think the sub-amendment has made anything even more clear. Under an agreement with all House leaders of recognized parties, well, in a joint committee with the Senate, does that include the House leaders of the Senate groups? The Senate is structured and organized differently than the House of Commons is when it comes to leaders, House leaders, and the various political entities there of recognized parties. I don't even think the Senate has recognized parties. I don't even think this wording is compliant with how the Senate internally operates its own practices and procedures. So how would we do that under a joint committee with the House of Commons and the Senate, or how would they do that if senators were themselves just in their own Senate committees? I don't think the language and wording in here applies at all. Furthermore, there's not a single person from House administration or Senate administration, insofar as the clerks, the procedural clerks from either of those houses here today to speak to the implications that I'm raising about how we would be able to comport and conduct ourselves within the framework of our current standing orders and how we operate at the committee level. So, Mr. Chair, I would urge my colleagues to revisit this. If these situations come up where a committee needs to have access and the members therein need to have access to classified information, those members that have already had a security clearance and those who have yet to do so can simply go through that process, as in the Winnipeg lab documents and the Afghan detainees. These kinds of arrangements can be worked out at the time. We don't need to go down the rabbit hole and discuss these items at this particular point in time. I frankly see these measures being put in place to stall and stymie the debate of this particular piece of legislation. I don't think they particularly add any value at the time, and frankly tie the hands of the intention of this bill, which is to simply grant the ability of members of Parliament to apply. It doesn't give us anything. These amendments are presuming that people have access to information. They've gone down way further than the intent of the legislation, gone down that road for things that can simply be worked out and put in place once Mr. Ruff's legislation, as intended, is passed. So I will be voting against not only the sub-amendment, but the original amendment. I don't doubt the intention of the person who moved the amendment, but I do doubt that it's based in anything that we've heard here as testimony. And frankly, there is nobody here, to my knowledge, on the witnesses that are present today that could speak to the implications of my privileges as a member of Parliament and how these amendments, if passed, would infringe upon them.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Mr. Duncan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good morning to colleagues and to our witnesses for helping us out with this by clause by clause. I'll just build on what Mr. Calkins had said, and I just want to start by saying, and through all of this, including an example, the amendment that Mr. Ruff had proposed and we passed just a few minutes ago, Mr. Ruff has made a very concerted effort of narrowly targeting the issue at hand here. And I think, for an example, the amendment that he had proposed and we had passed further clarifying, for greater clarity of addressing what this is. This goes back to the right for parliamentarians to apply. End of story. End of story. The amendment here and the sub-amendment here is getting into secondary and later phases that are not affected. It does not jeopardize our national security or our intelligence or classified documents in any way. As Mr. Ruff asked our witnesses again this morning to confirm, and what Dr. Giles said in testimony to us on Thursday, I'll read what was said on Thursday and reiterated again here this morning. A security clearance is sometimes misunderstood or portrayed as a special designation, a set of privileges, or an earned qualification like a rank. It is none of these. She goes on further, says, since clearance holders work in every part of government, a security clearance does not automatically grant the holder access to all information or assets at that level of clearance. And then we've gone on, we had many conversations of debates about the need for safeguards, which I don't deny. I'm not denying we have to have safeguards. There's no discussion or debate on that. But when we speak to what Mr. Ruff has put a concerted effort in doing is narrowly dealing with the right for parliamentarians to apply for a clearance, It does not automatically mean that a parliamentarian gets one. They still have to go through the process like everyone else, and further clarifies that it does not mean that once, for example, myself, if I were to apply and be granted through this, that I can suddenly walk up to any of you and say, I'd like to see the following 15 documents on X, Y, and Z. The safeguard already exists as is of where anybody of the 250,000 clearances that have been applied for in the last decade, as an example, if you're a staff member for a minister, if you're in the public service, being given that clearance does not give, as Dr. Giles had said the other day, does not give that right to go on there. So when we go on and we talk about through the sub-amendment and the amendment that's being proposed, our argument about scale and being out of scope, it is in Mr. Ruff's intention of how we're doing this, because at the end of the day, that safeguard is there that anybody that gets the clearance does not automatically get. The point that and Mr. Calkin's raised and been raised a few times over the discussion on C-377 is that if a parliamentarian receives it, it's there. They are more turnkey ready should a committee, should an individual parliamentarian, for example, if they were a victim of foreign interference, that is more turnkey ready to be prepared. At that time, as we've seen in the Winnipeg Labs documents, the Afghan detainee documents, going back a few parliaments before, the issues about a lot of the details, they're negotiated at that point in the discussion saying this committee or a special committee, whatever it may be, may need to see X, Y, or Z. Those can be negotiated or discussed as part of a disclosure to parliamentarians in a certain setting at that time. That's been done in the past, and that is a safeguard that at that time when a decision's been made. So I go back to make the same argument again that we've repeated, and Mr. Ruff has done a very good job of clarifying umpteen times I've lost track. This legislation and what he's proposed in good faith through an amendment we've seen, others and other efforts that he's made and will be making is to, again, it's the right for a parliamentarian to apply. Where right now, if they go in and if I were to send and put an application in right now, I would just be rejected. So what it is the right to apply, receive it if passed and pass the clearance, and then that's the end of the story. It does not entitle myself or a parliamentarian to any extra information, any right going from there. But what it can do is have more people at that level and prepared to receive in the event that we see this. And I think part of the efforts and the reason and the continued expressed intent for Mr. Ruff is the more they can get up to that level on various committees as they choose or the right to apply and have that, I think from a national security perspective and in the important role that we have in passing the budgets that you all work under and passing the legislation in which you interpret and operate in, it just gives that opportunity for down the road, should the need arise, the circumstance to have this clearance, have it prepared and be ready for it, I think is essential. So the sub-amendment and the amendment that are proposed here, I think I will just say again, is above and beyond the scope of Mr. Ruff's bill and his intentions. He's made that very clear. It is not to say that safeguards should not exist. The argument is that they do exist already because, again, someone who applies and passes a security clearance does not automatically mean they're granted access to a single document because of that aspect. So I'll leave my comments from there and continue to encourage my colleagues to reject this sub-amendment and amendment. And let's get back to the scope and the level at which Mr. Ruff is dealing with. It is very reasonable. It is very narrowed and target for a specific reason. And I think we could have a very good piece of legislation that does not jeopardize any safeguards that are there. They can use the existing ones that are in place now for the circumstance. I'll leave that for now for my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And while I fully respect your ruling on the scope of the amendment, at least that it is within scope on a technical basis, this really does add a whole new layer to what is a two-sentence, one-clause bill. I think it is important that we understand what the purpose and effect of the bill put forward by my colleague, Mr. Ruff, would be, because it seems, with the greatest of respect to some of my colleagues here in this committee, that it has been lost on some members. And it's not to say that concerns about protecting classified information, concerns around national security that they raised are illegitimate. They are legitimate. But they have really nothing to do with the purpose and effect of this bill if it were to come into law. And to that end, I would underscore that this two-sentence, one-clause bill would amend the Parliament of Canada Act so that every member of Parliament and senator can apply for a secret level security clearance. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. It doesn't in any way provide that upon making an application that the member would therefore receive the security clearance. That would be left to the government. The bill doesn't change that. In the event that the member received the secret security clearance, it wouldn't provide that they would be entitled to access any information. That would be left again in the control of the government, and there are protocols in place around sharing such information with persons who have a secret security clearance. And information is shared to persons who have such a designation on the basis of a need to know. So the bill doesn't impact that. It simply provides that a member can get their foot in the door with respect to the application process. And the reason there is a need for this bill is because, as it stands, members of Parliament and senators are more or less unable to get their foot in the door unless they already have a security clearance from their prior careers, such as my colleague Mr. Ruff, who has a top secret level security clearance. He has a clearance as a result of his appointment to NSICOP, but prior to that he had such a clearance as a result of his service in the Canadian Armed Forces, and there are other examples of that. But there is something fundamentally wrong, in my opinion, that members of Parliament, 338 people, 338 Canadians elected to represent about 100,000 people that deal with matters of national security, foreign affairs, public safety, national defense, all falling within the purview of what we do as members of Parliament, are somehow unable to even get our foot in the door to apply for not a top secret security clearance, but a secret security clearance. Difference between a top secret and secret security clearance, I mean, there are several distinctions, but one key aspect is a secret security clearance does not disclose sources and methods. It But it does provide a member who might have that and might have be able to establish a need to know basis upon why they would like to have access to information, some further background, further understanding, which would actually provide in some of these issues that we have been facing on matters of foreign interference and so on, greater transparency to the member in a classified setting that could perhaps provide clarity and actually address concerns that might be raised where there isn't a basis, but the member might raise it because they can't. Information that could help shed light on whatever concern they have, they don't have access to. 250,000 applications have been made in the last 10 years for a secret security clearance. 250,000. And Mr. Ruff, when he appeared to present on his bill, I asked him the question, how many secret security applications out of 250,000 have been turned down? And the number was under 10?
23.
23 out of 250,000. And somehow we have 338 members of parliament that can't get their foot in the door, but of course ministers have security clearances, their staff have clearances, even interns in ministers' offices have clearances. But I, as a member of parliament representing about 125,000 people, can't even get my foot in the door. How does that make sense? It doesn't. And so all Mr. Ruff's bill would do is to say, I can get my foot in the door, and then if I made that decision, I would have really my entire life examined to determine if I was trustworthy and any other concerns or red flags. And if I passed that, then I'd have a clearance. But again, a clearance is nothing more than receiving that accreditation. But I'd still have to establish a need to know, and it would still be within the control of the government to share anything with me. I could have such a clearance and have no information of a secret classified nature revealed to me. Now, you can have a discussion about issues and processes around how the government controls information, how it's shared, but that is, again, not the purpose of this bill. This bill has nothing to do with that. It is about as narrow in scope of a bill as one could draft, hence it being a two-sentence, one-clause bill. And so I would have thought that given how straightforward it is, and I would also add, given that it was in fact a unanimous recommendation of this committee that there be processes in place for members to be able to receive security clearances to better understand national security matters. And given, I think NSCOP has weighed in. This has been raised at the National Inquiry on Foreign Interference. That this bill would have gotten out of committee after one meeting, quite frankly. But we heard, I think there's some members who seem to think it's funny.
Oh, that was something.
Oh, okay. No worries. Well, because I just don't find this very funny. I find it actually just dispiriting that, we have members insulting me. I think that just underscores the tone that we have and why this is so disappointing, because we have someone like Mr. Ruff who has served his country in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years, who has a very good understanding of matters of national security, who has received a security clearance at the highest level and has held that for a number of years, who sits on NSCOP and therefore has a unique perspective as a member of Parliament. And we have certain members who don't have that background, don't have that experience, don't have that knowledge, who didn't even have the courtesy to talk to him, and table drop a bunch of sub-amendments that have nothing to do with his bill. Now, I will submit that there's one basis for that, and that is that they don't want this bill to pass. They would rather gut the bill, and it's passing strange for a party like the NDP that has never been in government, hopefully never will be in government, that they're against members of Parliament being able to get their foot in the door to apply for a secret security clearance. I thought the NDP was all about accountability. I guess now under the leadership of sellout Jagmeet Singh.
Chair?
Yeah, point of order from Ms. Matheson.
I'm really sorry that I made the member mad, but maybe he can focus back on the comments that he was going to make about the bill, as opposed to trying to insult in a sideways my leader. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cooper, I didn't quite catch whatever exchange happened a few moments ago, but nonetheless, if you can keep your remarks, please, to the matter at hand. Thank you.
Under the leadership of sellout Jagmeet Singh, this is a party that.
Mr. Cooper.
You were told once
I have
and asked once kindly.
Everyone knows Jagmeet Singh is a sellout. And
okay.
Cooper?
And Mr.
All right.
Chair, going back to the sub-amendment.
Mr. Cooper, I have the floor now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend so that everybody can catch their breath, maybe have some water, maybe a bite to eat, maybe use the washroom, and we'll see where we get when we come back from that suspension. has been subbed out for the moment. We go to the next speaker on the list, and that was Mr. Ruff. So, Mr. Ruff, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to my testimony a little bit and sort of the history behind how I came up with this bill in the first place, because it's very relevant to my concerns around the amendment and the sub-amendment, which is really discussing how do we put in the proper safeguards around classified information. I looked at this. Look, I think I said this in my testimony. When I first conceived of this idea, I was thinking, you know what I can do? I'm going to make every MP, couldn't handle senators, that, you know what, it's going to be mandatory that they get a security clearance. If they fail it should be publicized in the news, et cetera, et cetera. Well, as I dug into that with the appropriate people to help draft the legislation, I quickly ran into an issue of parliamentary privilege, issues where I recognize, well, that it actually interferes in our democratic rights of Canadians to some extent, or to run for office. And I quickly, as I dug more and more into it, I realized I can't solve this. I can't do justice to it in a private member's bill, where I'm limited to a couple hours of debate. If it gets through, get it to committee, get some testimony on it, get some experts forward, and then properly get it to ground on a suitable solution to tackle the whole gambit of how does it potentially interfere or not in parliamentary privilege, et cetera. Because as I talked to different parliamentarians across different parties, I understood there's actually a wide divergence of opinion on what is the best way to do this, what is parliament's rights, what are parliamentarians' rights. So I said, all right, I can't do that. What can I do? You know what? I can fix an obvious stumbling block that I've seen from under two different consecutive federal governments, where they've run into situations where ad hoc committees had to be put together. People had to, get a security clearance, which took umpteen months, sometimes years, for people to be approved. You know, there could have been people that were originally going to sit on some of these committees that maybe were not suitable to get a clearance, and then these parties have to put forward new names to get the clearance, and it takes forever, which ultimately degrades the public's trust in our democratic institutions and processes. As well, we've had committees. You can go to certain committees. You can look historically at the Defense Committee, other committees where they've asked, they have witnesses testifying, and they say, well, we can't tell you that. You don't have a security clearance. So how could I fix this? Well, I thought about it, and I said, well, the first step that I can actually put in place is just allow a parliamentarian, an MP or a senator, to have the right to apply. That's it. I realized I can likely solve, I thought, with unanimous consent from all members, they'd recognize that as parliamentarians, they should have the right to a security clearance, to apply for security. That's it. That was the whole purpose of the bill. That is the whole purpose of the bill. And that's all the bill states, is that parliamentarians have the right to apply for a secret security clearance. The intent behind it was never to get into and potentially handcuff, hinder, or debate how whatever government of the day protects classified information in this case, because my bill only deals with the secret level, secret information. Those steps and processes already exist. This amendment and the sub-amendment talk about putting safeguards in place that already the government has the ability and does put in place. So let's build on that letter. Let's look at some examples. Mr. Jorgensen, I'll put you on the hot seat first as your past experience. I know you were directly involved with the ad hoc committee on the Winnipeg Labs. How long did that take to get all the members that ended up looking at those files security cleared?
So I don't have an exact number for you. I wasn't prepared for that. But once the decision was made and the MOU was signed, it actually didn't take very long. I would point to you that that process took a long time.
to get that MOU and that process in place.
Correct.
What about the actual security clearances for each of the individual members that were, how many members, I don't need the names, but how many members ended up getting access to those documents?
So there are 8 members, and I can tell you that my team always prioritizes those requests, and we get them done in a week or two.
In a week or two. So they can be done very, very quickly. Now, I'm going to pick on you because of your previous employment as the Director of Operations at the NSICOP Secretariat. How long, without naming names, but how long does it take now at a higher level, some of those security applications to get processed for a TS?
With respect to NSICOP, so same thing, we would prioritize them. They can happen very, very quickly. They can happen very quickly.
They can. I know mine happened very quickly, but talking to other previous members or members of that committee, some of them took months.
Let me put it this way. The clearance can happen very quickly.
Yep, no, agreeing it can happen if it's a priority, right? But it is one step in the negotiation. The point is, let's go back to the Winnipeg Labs, what safeguards were put in place, did the government put in place for those 8 members of that ad hoc committee?
So those 8 members, and only 4 of which actually were allowed to attend at a single time, but the safeguard was an oath, and then the oath essentially replicated what you've seen at NSICOP.
So an oath that is there anything classified about that oath itself?
No, I mean, the oath that you have taken as a member of NSICOP, I believe, is online, but in any event, it's not classified, no.
So it's the exact same oath that the members of NSICOP?
I believe it is.
All right. So there was nothing preventing the government putting that safeguard in and asking those members if they want access to those classified documents that they had to swear an oath?
There's nothing preventing that. I think it is important to note, however, that those members never waived their parliamentary privilege.
Good point. Excellent point. In fact, I think that's a very valid point that may come up as part of a future discussion, maybe another amendment. So, again, I'm not talking about parliamentary privilege. I'm saying because this here amendment and sub-amendment doesn't actually talk about parliamentary privilege. It just talks about sort of a process, right? So this process is laid out in this amendment and sub-amendment. You know, must not, again, it's more of a statement of what they should or shouldn't do, but ultimately, this process, the government, if it chose today, so let's pretend my bill never got debated, wasn't part of the discussion here today, but a committee, or a group of parliamentarians. Let's just pick somebody, let's just say me before I was put on NSICOP, as a member with top secret security clearance before when I got elected, and the government had chosen, I had asked and say, look, I want to see the daily, based on my background, the daily intelligence brief that is produced by the Canadian Forces at the Canadian Joint Operations Command. I want to see that document every day. I want to know. Would the government likely grant me access to that document just because I had a top secret security clearance?
I can't speculate. If the Minister of Defense wanted to grant you access like that, he or she could do that.
So the minister, now again, I'm a bad example because I had TS and there's different for the members sitting here. When you do get a TS, there are additional safeguards and protections that are put in at that level. But at the secret level, let's pretend the minister gave that approval, said, you know what, Ruff, you're allowed to see this. What would be the safeguards? I guess if you're not maybe the right person, we better have the DM of Defense here as the department responsible. So let's park the Defense. Let's look to the law enforcement, RCMP. Mr. Calkins is being targeted by foreign interference. He has a secret security clearance. He's applied, had it. No, hypothetically. Right? or CSIS, right? You might want to jump in on and answer on this. Before you brief, if they had a secret security clearance, would you be able to brief them at a much more level of specificity and detail?
Yep. If I just quickly respond, I think it's really important as a factual matter to note all of the security clearances that we give under TBS was purpose-built for the public service. So there are safeguards. There's plenty of safeguards in place. There is no safeguard equivalent to your immunity under parliamentary privilege.
That's fine for sharing of information. I'm not questioning it. What's the safeguard for exempt staff, Section 128(1) of the PSEA?
So any kind of security policy framework, part of the strength of that policy framework is monitoring compliance and enforcing it. And for an exempt staff member of a minister's office, if they are chosen as a candidate to be for that job, before they are offered the position, they must pass the security clearance process. If they perform any action or there's any reason to believe that they should not continue to hold a security clearance, they could lose their job. They could lose their employment. They could suffer other consequences, legal consequences as a result of that. They do not enjoy parliamentary privilege.
Yep. No, so I don't question that. Do they swear? Do exempt staff swear an oath?
Exempt staff do not swear an oath.
They do not swear an oath. So the exempt staff, the intern, does not swear an oath to get a secret security clearance. So my point is, what if my previous amendment had passed that would have made the process for applying a security clearance and then being applicable under the PSEA Section 128(1), what would the consequences be for a parliamentarian that disclosed improperly any information? Would the recommendation be back to strip, and would they lose that secret security clearance?
Very difficult to speculate. If a parliamentarian released classified information in the House of Commons and claimed parliamentary privilege on it, my understanding is that they are not subject to any kind of legal or civil liability as a result of that. Could their clearance be revoked? It certainly could be, but that would be the only impact.
So that's my point. So right now, when we put, and we've had that case, right? So let's just go back to the Winnipeg Labs. Those members of Parliament or members that were part of that committee swore an oath, safeguard that was put in place by the government, got access to the classified information. They did not waive their parliamentary privilege. Have they leaked any of that information publicly? Your mic's not on.
To the best of my knowledge, they have not done that, but you can't change parliamentary privilege through an MOU.
Gotcha. So again, all great. My point is, that's a decision that this current government, just looking at the most recent example, has already decided to put in place as a process, right? Swear an oath, not accept the risk that a parliamentarian could stand up and disclose that information. That government decided that that was in the best interest of the Canadian public, of our country, to share that information, allow people to apply, get a security clearance, get that access to that information, and they accepted that risk. My bill does not stop the government from doing that or even doing more. They could ask any parliamentarian as a condition, just because you have a security clearance, if you want access to anything, you have to follow the following safeguards. So again, I am not opposed to safeguards. What I'm opposed is an amendment to a bill that doesn't, we didn't hear testimony, we didn't debate that, we didn't bring it forward, I didn't bring it forward as part of a thing to tackle, because that to me is something that is worthy of a legitimate, in-depth debate and discussion in the House of Commons to allow all 300 plus other members that don't have the privilege of sitting in this committee and having this debate right now, the 100+ senators, to actually debate that. I mean, I guess the senators, to be fair to them, they'll eventually see this, regardless if it goes through in whatever form if it does, because then they'll have a chance to study it properly. But I mean, for those of us that have gone through second reading, where I was limited to 2 hours of debate, only person that had to answer questions was the sponsor of the bill. Everybody else that spoke to it, and I sat there, and if you listen to my reply to the bill, heck, the government put up a parliamentary secretary that hadn't even read the bill and spoke for 10 minutes and hadn't even read the bill before he spoke to it, and I called him out on it. No, it wasn't you. It was the member that speaks 10 times more than any other parliamentarian in the House of Commons, or MP. So, and he got caught on it a couple days later because he made the mistake of being honest with me. So my point is, this amendment and sub-amendment, not that I'm opposed to safeguards. I'm 100%, and in fact, my opinion may be much more draconian than a number of the members around this table and even the officials sitting here on what those necessary safeguards would be, what the potential punishment should be if somebody discloses information that compromises our capabilities, our techniques, our sources, because I have zero time for it. But the point is, that is worthy, and it's important that discussion and debate is done in a proper, wholehearted manner, that is right up front what the legislation and the intent behind that legislation is put forward. In fact, I would argue that should not be a private member's bill to figure out what is the best way to protect classified information that may or may not be shared with parliamentarians. That is worthy of a government bill that could come forward and lay out, this is the intent, this is why they're doing it, this is the concerns. Because I would argue, we got a great example with foreign interference in this country where people with the highest security clearances have leaked information, and they have the consequences of going to jail for decades should they get caught. And it didn't stop people from leaking information, right? So I'm all about the safeguards, but that needs to be discussed and debated in a wholehearted manner in the House, at a committee, with all the people that actually have the time and efforts to consider the implications to parliamentary privilege. I mean, let's look at parliamentary privilege. NSICOP, we waive it. I got personally, as an individual, I got no issues. I signed that in 2 seconds. I'll waive every I don't need parliamentary privilege ever. It doesn't bother me in the least bit. I will stand by my words, whether I say it in this House or out on the street, and I will willingly accept the consequences and the accountability for anything I say. If I say it here, I'll walk out and say it on the street. I got no issues with that. That's who I am, right? But the issue is, that is actually being challenged. It's just I'm not a lawyer here. I think it's Grant. They're seeking leave at the Supreme Court, just yesterday or the day before, challenging that. You know what? Parliament, the NSICOP Act should not be able to take away parliamentary privilege. This is a huge issue. If they're questioning that for NSICOP, where members are cleared to the highest levels and have access to information that a lot of the cabinet doesn't have access to, then I think it's worthy of a proper debate and analysis with the appropriate people at all levels before we actually try to go down this path. So I'm just asking, I guess before I'll shut up for now. I know some of my other colleagues have other points that they want to make, but ultimately, I would just ask my colleagues in this committee to consider, do they think parliamentarians have the same rights as a summer intern to apply for a security clearance? And secondly, that if we're going to do that and allow them to apply, that ultimately, before you give them access to anything, that the proper debate and safeguards should occur in a properly non-time constrained aspect to make sure we are not interfering in a parliamentarian's ability to represent their constituents and do their job, and they understand up front what the compromises, weaknesses, or risks that they are putting forth by sort of us passing this, amendments or sub-amendments that, again, go way beyond the scope, and I know I lost that argument, Chair, and that's not, but on what the intent of my bill is. So I'll leave my remarks for now at that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruff. We are at 1 o'clock, colleagues. I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and we will continue our conversation. Thank you.